Welcome back, my dudes. I was doing some grilling the other day and I got to thinking about camping in D&D and thinking about D&D is fun. But camping in D&D isn't. Picture this, you're the DM and your players are walking from Phandalin to Neverwinter because they just saw the movie and now they gotta go to Neverwinter. You have absolutely nothing prepped for Neverwinter, so you're trying to drag your feet and hope that you can kill the session before they get there. Day turns into night, homie's gotta rest. Your players tell you that they stop for camp and that's pretty much it. You go ahead and roll random encounters, but nothing happens. They wake up in the morning ready to go. But shouldn't camping be more interesting? I think it should. What if where and how you camp mattered? I mean, after all, is camping in a dungeon the same as camping in a perfect spot next to a lake? What if instead of simply rolling for random encounters, you consider the environment, and then ask your players how they deal with it, and then do some dice rolls to figure out how successful they were at making that camp? Suddenly, your players are actually thinking about camping like it's part of the game and not just one big excuse to hit the long rest button on D&D Beyond. So hear me out. Let's make a new mechanic for camping that actually makes it more interesting, more engaging. First, we'll start with 4 metrics to a successful camp: food, water, shelter, and security. And when your players decide to make camp, then you as the DM, you're going to set the DC for each of these metrics based on the environment that the players are trying to camp in. In a forest, food could be found by hunting or gathering, so pretty easy. Let's go ahead and set that to a 10. Water should be pretty abundant, so let's go ahead and set that to a 10 too. Shelter could be a little bit more tricky because it could rain or the ground could be uncomfortable to try and sleep on. So let's bump it up a little and make it a 12. And finally, for security, let's think of how much danger is in the area. For this, let's give it a 16 because, you know, goblins and bandits and bears, oh my. Now, ask your players, what are you guys doing to provide for these 4 metrics? Let them talk amongst themselves and come up with how each player is going to help. Depending on how awesome or shitty their plan is, go ahead and adjust the DC appropriately. They don't want to set watches, up the security DC. And if they made sure to put their tents near a river, then drop the water DC to 1. Next, for each of those DCs, let's multiply by the number of players in the party. I have 4 players, so I'm going to multiply by 4. That 10 DC for food becomes 40. Now have each player roll the appropriate skill check for the metric and then total their results. Any nat 20s, we're just going to go and succeed the check. Now for each metric, determine if they succeeded or failed. If they succeed on all 4 metrics and they succeeded their long rest, they wake up fresh as a daisy, ready to go. However, for penalties, and stay with me here because I'll show you in a moment why penalties make this all worthwhile. If they fail for food or shelter, then they don't regen any hit points for the long rest. They still get their long rest, but they won't regen hit points. For failing water, then they get 1 level of exhaustion. And for failing security, then we can go ahead and run that random encounter. 2 or more failures is a failed camp, a failed long rest. And yeah, that seems harsh, but this is actually where it shines. You see, camping in the woods is totally reasonable. You can take the time, you can get it done. Camping in a desert or a jungle have varying difficulties and challenges, and you can adjust your DC for these checks appropriately. However, camping in a dungeon should be really difficult. There's a whole lot of ways that could go wrong and why it should not be easy to do. Yes, they might be able to camp in a dungeon, but they better have a solid plan. They better have food and water on them because they won't be able to forage. And they better find a totally sweet spot to hide so they aren't discovered. So we're setting the initial DC based on the environment around us, and then we're adjusting that DC based on the plans of the players. Suddenly camping becomes this nail-biting experience where the group has to collaborate and work together while role-playing in order to get it done. And a night at the inn becomes golden because it checks all of those boxes automatically. Suddenly staying at the inn makes way more sense than camping at the edge of the forest just outside of town just to save a couple coins. So if your players are too cheap to stay at the inn, they want to hang out in the woods instead? Sure, absolutely. Let's give it a go and see what happens. After all, who has ever woken up from a night of camping on the ground, fully rested? It really shouldn't be as restful as staying at an inn, and now your game can reflect that. I've included a link down below with a free form that'll make this very easy to do. And one more thing, if your players came prepared with food and water, they came prepared with a plan to camp, then don't be afraid to lower that DC. Because if you as the DM actually succeeded in having your players plan for camping before a long trip, well then you won DM D&D. And so did your players because the world became more real and they accounted for it. And that's it, homies. Crush the sub button, tickle the like button, and fondle that bell. And if you really want to show some love for our baby channel, leave a comment below and let me know what you think. I answer every comment. See you guys next time.
This I give you now, trusting that you will protect it with your very life.
I will.
Hold this.